The kitchen aboard the UES Horizon hummed with quiet efficiency as Sarah Chen chopped vegetables for the evening meal. Steam rose from multiple pots, filling the galley with the comforting aroma of home-cooked food. To the 847 souls aboard the massive colony ship, Sarah was simply the head cook who somehow made protein paste taste like real food and kept morale high with her warm smile and endless supply of cookies. What they didn't know was that Sarah Chen had once been staff Sergeant Sarah Ghost Chen of the Navy SEALs, holder of 3 Purple Hearts, 2 Bronze Stars, and a classified mission record that would make hardened veterans weep. She had traded her combat fatigues for an apron, her rifle for a chef's knife, seeking peace among the stars after too many years of war. The Horizon was humanity's newest deep space colony vessel, carrying families, scientists, and dreamers to establish mankind's furthest outpost on Kepler 442b. Sarah had volunteered for kitchen duties specifically because it was as far from combat as she could get. The rhythmic chopping of vegetables was meditation. The satisfied faces of diners were her therapy. Captain Rodriguez often stopped by the kitchen during his rounds, drawn by both the excellent food and Sarah's calming presence. He had no idea that the woman who fretted over seasoning ratios had once single-handedly held off an entire enemy platoon for 6 hours in the Martian colonies. Sarah preferred it that way. "Another masterpiece, chef," said Lieutenant Barnes as he collected the evening's menu. The young officer had developed a habit of lingering in the kitchen, clearly smitten with the mysterious cook who could make even recycled water taste refreshing. Sarah smiled and handed him a fresh-baked roll. "Just doing my job, Lieutenant." The ship's intercom crackled to life with the captain's voice announcing their approach to the Kepler system. In 3 days, they would begin humanity's most ambitious colonization effort. Children pressed their faces against viewports, watching distant stars grow brighter. Scientists checked and rechecked their equipment. Engineers ran final diagnostics on the landing pods. In the kitchen, Sarah continued her prep work for tomorrow's breakfast, unaware that her peaceful new life was about to be shattered. The universe had other plans for the woman who just wanted to cook. Deep in space, predator ships with sleek, chitinous hulls adjusted their course. The Zephyrians had been watching humanity's expansion with growing alarm. These hairless apes reproduced too quickly, adapted too easily, and showed an unsettling tendency to fight back when cornered. The colony ship represented a threat that could not be allowed to succeed. Admiral Vexikar studied the tactical display with all 4 of his black eyes. The human vessel was large but appeared to be purely civilian. Their intelligence indicated no military escort, no weapon systems beyond basic defense shields. It would be a simple matter to disable the ship, process the humans for their protein content, and claim the system for the Zephyrian Empire. What the Admiral didn't understand was that humans were never truly civilian. Every human carried within them the legacy of 10,000 years of warfare, of survival against impossible odds, of a species that had clawed its way from caves to the stars through sheer bloody-minded determination. And sometimes, just sometimes, those humans had been professionally trained to embody that legacy. Sarah was cleaning her prep station when the first alarm sounded. She paused, a dish towel in her hands as red lights began flashing throughout the ship. The general quarters alarm was something she had hoped never to hear again. "All hands to emergency stations." Captain Rodriguez's voice echoed through the corridors, tight with controlled panic. "We have multiple unknown contacts approaching at high speed." This is not a drill. The kitchen emptied as her staff rushed to their assigned emergency positions. Sarah stood alone among the silent ovens and cooling pots, her hands steady despite the chaos erupting around her. She knew that sound, the deep thrumming that vibrated through the ship's hull. Incoming hostiles. Through the small porthole above her prep station, she could see them now. Dozens of angular ships, their hulls gleaming like black oil, moving with predatory grace toward the horizon. They were beautiful in the way that sharks were beautiful. Perfect killing machines evolved for one purpose. Sarah Chen, former Navy SEAL, current head cook, closed her eyes and took a deep breath. The smell of her kitchen, onions and herbs, bread and coffee, filled her nostrils. For just a moment, she allowed herself to mourn the peaceful life she was about to lose. Then she opened her eyes, and Staff Sergeant Ghost Chen was back. The bridge of the UES Horizon erupted in controlled chaos as alien ships closed the distance. Captain Rodriguez gripped his command chair, watching the tactical display with growing dread. 43 enemy vessels surrounded them, each one bristling with weapons that his civilian transport couldn't hope to match. "Shields at maximum," reported Lieutenant Commander Hayes from the tactical station. "But Captain, they're not military grade. We can maybe withstand a few hits before they fail completely." "Communications, try to raise them on all frequencies," Rodriguez ordered. His voice remained steady, but sweat beaded on his forehead. 847 souls depended on his decisions in the next few minutes. The alien response came not through words, but through action. Energy beams lanced out from the lead vessel, striking the horizon's shields with devastating force. The ship shuddered, lights flickering as power systems strained to compensate. "Shields down to 60% from that single volley," Hayes called out. "Captain, at this rate we have maybe 5 minutes before they punch through." Deep in the ship's emergency shelter, families huddled together as the vessel shook around them. Children cried while parents tried to maintain calm facades. Dr. Martinez, the expedition's chief scientist, held his daughter close and wondered if humanity's greatest journey would end before it truly began. In the engineering section, Chief O'Brien and his team worked frantically to reroute power to the shields. "Give me everything you've got," he shouted over the alarm klaxons. "Strip power from non-essential systems. Life support, artificial gravity, even the bloody coffee makers if you have to." But in the kitchen, Sarah was doing something no one expected. While the rest of the ship prepared for death or capture, she was taking inventory, not of food supplies, but of potential weapons and tactical resources. Industrial-grade cutting tools. Check. Chemical cleaning supplies that could be repurposed into explosives. Check. Kitchen knives balanced for throwing. Multiple checks. Most importantly, the service corridors and maintenance shafts that honeycombed the ship. Pathways she had memorized during her months of peaceful cooking. Sarah opened a concealed panel behind the main freezer unit and withdrew items that officially didn't exist. Her personal sidearm, a military-grade plasma pistol she wasn't supposed to have, emergency medical supplies that went far beyond basic first aid, a tactical communications device that could tap into military frequencies. The ship shook again as another alien volley struck home. Through her porthole, Sarah could see the enemy vessels moving into boarding positions. She recognized the formation, a classic pincer movement designed to overwhelm defensive positions through multiple simultaneous breaches. Her personal communicator crackled to life with Captain Rodriguez's voice on the emergency command frequency. "All department heads report status. We're looking at imminent boarding action." Sarah activated her device and spoke with the calm professionalism that had once coordinated strikes against enemy positions. "Kitchen department reporting. Captain, this is Chen. I need to speak with you privately on Secure Channel 7. There was a pause, then Rodriguez's confused voice came through on the encrypted channel. "Chen, what's wrong with your voice?" "You sound different." "Because I am different," Sarah replied, strapping on tactical gear she had hoped never to wear again. "Captain, my full name is Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, formerly of the Navy SEALs 3rd Special Operations Battalion. I need you to listen very carefully." The silence stretched for several seconds before Rodriguez responded. "Holy hell. Chen, are you serious?" "Dead serious, sir. Those ships out there are using Zephyrian attack patterns. I've fought them before in the Proxima campaign. They'll breach the ship in multiple locations simultaneously, drive the crew toward central collection points, then process everyone for transport to their bioprocessing facilities." Another impact shook the ship. "Shields down to 30%, came Hayes's voice over the general comm. "What do you need?" Rodriguez asked, his military bearing reasserting itself as he recognized a combat veteran. "Access to internal security systems, emergency armory codes, and ship's blueprints. Also, I need you to understand that what I'm about to do will not look like standard defensive procedures. Trust me anyway." "Done. Sending codes now. Chen, how many of them can you handle?" Sarah checked her weapons one final time and moved toward the kitchen service entrance. Through the ship's sensors, she could see the alien boarding pods attaching to the hull like metallic parasites. Each pod would carry between 8 and 12 Zephyrian warriors, 8-foot-tall reptilian nightmares with razor claws and an unshakable belief in their own superiority. "Captain," she said, her voice carrying the cold certainty of a predator about to hunt, "I once held the line against 60 Zephyrian shock troopers on Proxima Station with nothing but a rifle and a bad attitude. This ship has better cover, more resources, and civilians I actually give a damn about protecting. The first hull breach alarm sounded, followed immediately by 2 more. The enemy was coming. How many can I handle? Sarah smiled grimly as she disappeared into the maintenance shafts. Let's find out. The first Zephyrian boarding pod punched through the hull near the ship's central hub with a sound like thunder. Atmospheric pressure alarms screamed as emergency force fields activated to contain the breach. Through the jagged hole came the aliens humanity had learned to fear during the Proxima War. Each Zephyrian stood nearly 8 feet tall, their scaled hides gleaming with natural armor that could deflect small arms fire. Razor-sharp claws extended from their 4-fingered hands, and their elongated skulls housed brains that had evolved for pack hunting across a dozen worlds. They moved with fluid grace, thermal sensors sweeping for human heat signatures. Squad leader Vashatai activated his helmet display, studying the ship's layout his technicians had extracted from human databases. The vessel was larger than expected, with an unusual number of maintenance corridors and service shafts. No matter. Humans were soft, slow creatures who relied on primitive technology. This would be a simple harvest. Spread out, he hissed to his pack. Drive them toward the central gathering areas. Remember, we need them alive for processing. In the ship's security center, Captain Rodriguez watched the tactical display with a mixture of horror and fascination. The aliens were moving exactly as Sarah had predicted. Multiple breach points, coordinated advances toward population centers. But something else was happening that he couldn't quite understand. "Sir," reported Ensign Kim from the sensor station, "I'm reading some kind of interference in sections 7 through 12. It's like something is moving through the maintenance shafts, but the signatures are weird." Rodriguez keyed his communicator. "Chen, what's your status?" Sarah's voice came back calm and professional. "Phase 1 initiation. Captain, in approximately 90 seconds, you're going to see casualty reports from the alien boarding parties. Do not send security teams to investigate. Repeat, keep all personnel in secured areas until I give the all-clear." "Understood, Chen. Be careful." "Careful went out the airlock about 10 minutes ago, sir." Deep in the ship's bowels, Sarah moved through the maintenance shafts with the fluid efficiency of a trained killer. She had shed her apron and chef's hat, replacing them with tactical gear that transformed her from a kindly cook into something that would give nightmares to monsters. The first Zephyrian patrol never saw her coming. They were advancing down corridor C7, following their thermal sensors toward a group of hiding civilians, when Sarah dropped from a ceiling vent directly behind their rear guard. Her knife found the gap between the alien's skull plates before he could even register her presence. The squad leader spun around, claws extended, just in time to meet Sarah's plasma pistol. The energy burst took his head off cleanly. The remaining 2 aliens had time to raise their weapons before Sarah was among them, moving with the deadly precision that had made her legendary among her former unit. 30 seconds later, the corridor was silent except for the soft hiss of cooling alien blood. "First contact neutralized," Sarah reported over her tactical comm. "Moving to intercept Squad 2. The second boarding party had just reached the civilian shelters when the lights went out. Emergency illumination cast everything in hellish red, but the Zephyrians' thermal vision made the darkness irrelevant. Or so they thought. What they didn't account for was that Sarah had spent the last 10 minutes rerouting the ship's heating systems. Thermal baffles now vented waste heat throughout the corridor, creating a maze of false signatures that confused their sensors. By the time they realized the trap, Sarah was already moving. She struck from above, dropping onto the squad leader and riding him to the ground while her knife found every gap in his armor. The rest of the pack whirled to face this new threat, but Sarah had already disappeared back into the ventilation system. "Contact lost," one of the surviving aliens reported to his ship. "Pack leader Vashatai is not responding. Something is hunting us." Admiral Vexkar studied the reports with growing unease. 3 boarding parties had gone silent in the space of 5 minutes. The humans were supposed to be helpless civilians, not trained warriors capable of eliminating his elite troops. "Send reinforcements," he ordered. "Double the boarding parties. Whatever resistance they have mounted cannot withstand superior numbers." But Sarah wasn't just eliminating aliens. She was learning their patterns, their communications frequencies, their tactical procedures. Each engagement provided more intelligence, and intelligence was the deadliest weapon in any special forces operator's arsenal. The third engagement took place in the engineering section. where a full squad of 12 Zephyrians was attempting to seize control of the ship's power systems. Chief O'Brien and his team had barricaded themselves behind heavy machinery, but it was only a matter of time before the aliens broke through. Sarah came at them from 3 directions simultaneously. First, she triggered an overload in the main power coupling, filling the area with blinding electrical arcs. Then she used the confusion to place explosive charges at key structural points. Finally, she opened fire from an elevated position, picking off targets with surgical precision. When the smoke cleared, 11 Zephyrians lay dead. The 12th managed to transmit a single word before Sarah's final shot silenced him forever. Demon. The word spread through the alien fleet like wildfire. Something was loose on the human ship, something that killed with inhuman efficiency and vanished like smoke. Squad leaders began reporting that their troops were afraid, an emotion Zephyrians rarely experienced and never admitted. In the kitchen where this had all begun, Sarah paused to reload her weapons and check her tactical display. 28 aliens eliminated, 0 human casualties. But she knew this was just the beginning. The real test would come when the enemy stopped underestimating their prey and started bringing everything they had. "Captain," she reported. "Initial phase complete. Be advised they're going to escalate. Time to show them what happens when you threaten a human colony ship." Admiral Vexcar stared at the tactical display in disbelief. 7 boarding parties had gone silent in less than 20 minutes. The human vessel should have been secured by now, its occupants herded into processing chambers. Instead, his warriors were dying in corridors that should have offered no resistance. "Impossible," he hissed, his 4 eyes narrowing. "Humans are weak. They have no natural weapons, no armor, no pack instincts. How can one of them be eliminating trained warriors?" His communications officer looked up from his station with something approaching fear. "Admiral, the surviving teams are reporting contact with what they describe as a shadow killer. It strikes without warning, uses the ship's infrastructure against us, and vanishes before reinforcements can arrive." "Superstitious nonsense," Vexcar snapped, but doubt crept into his voice. The Zephyrian Empire had conquered 17 species across 40 systems. None had ever demonstrated this level of individual lethality. Deep in the ship's hydroponics bay, Sergeant First Class Kyrell crouched behind a bank of growing pods with the 3 survivors of his 12-warrior assault team. They had been sent to secure the ship's food production systems when the attacks began. Now they were trapped, jumping at every shadow. "She's in the vents again," whispered Trooper Yex Hall, his thermal scanner showing heat signatures moving through the ceiling spaces. "The patterns make no sense. One moment she's behind us, the next she's ahead. It's like she knows the ship better than we do." What they didn't understand was that Sarah did know the ship better than they did. During her months as head cook, she had explored every inch of the Horizon's infrastructure. She knew which maintenance shafts connected to which areas, where the emergency supply caches were hidden, and how to use the ship's own systems as weapons. The hydroponics bay attack came from 3 directions at once. First, Sarah triggered the emergency fire suppression system, filling the area with dense vapor that interfered with thermal imaging. Then she activated the automated harvesting equipment, sending mechanical arms whirring through the space at head height. Finally, she dropped down among the confused aliens with her knife and pistol. The fight lasted 90 seconds. When the vapor cleared, 4 more Zephyrians had joined their fallen comrades. On the bridge, Captain Rodriguez watched his ship's internal sensors with amazement. Sarah wasn't just fighting the aliens. She was systematically dismantling their invasion. Each engagement was planned and executed with military precision that spoke of extensive combat experience. "Captain," called Lieutenant Hayes from Tactical, "the alien ships are moving into a new formation. Looks like they're preparing for a massive boarding action. Dozens of pods this time." Rodriguez opened his secure channel to Sarah. "Chen, they're doubling down. How many more can you handle?" Sarah's voice came back steady, despite the sounds of combat in the background. "Sir, I need you to understand something about Special Forces doctrine. We don't fight fair. We don't engage in honorable combat. We use every advantage we can find and we make the enemy's strengths into weaknesses. What does that mean for us? It means I'm about to turn this ship into the deadliest maze in human space. I need 10 minutes to set up, then I need you to do something that's going to sound crazy." Another wave of boarding pods was already attaching to the hull. The second assault would begin any moment. "Talk to me, Chen." When I give the signal, I need you to vent atmosphere from sections 4 through 9. Blow the emergency airlocks, decompress the corridors, the whole thing. Hayes spun around in his chair. Captain, that'll kill anyone in those sections. That's the point, Sarah replied grimly. The aliens are using sealed environmental suits. They can survive in vacuum for up to 30 minutes. But their suits weren't designed for the kind of pressure differential I'm about to create. Rodriguez understood immediately. You want to use decompression as a weapon. Among other things. Captain, these aliens have been conquering species for centuries because they rely on superior individual strength and pack tactics. What they've never faced is a human trained in asymmetric warfare, someone who doesn't fight like prey. The second wave began with 48 Zephyrian warriors breaching the ship at 6 different points. They moved with increased caution, having learned to respect the unseen threat that had devastated their first assault. But caution couldn't save them from what Sarah had prepared. She had spent her 10 minutes turning the ship's infrastructure into a weapon. Emergency bulkheads were rigged to slam shut at predetermined moments, separating alien squads and isolating them for individual destruction. Life support systems had been reprogrammed to create atmospheric hazards in specific corridors. Even the ship's artificial gravity had been weaponized, with localized field generators ready to crush unwary invaders. The largest boarding party, led by Commander Thexral, advanced down the main corridor toward the civilian shelters. They moved in perfect formation, thermal scanners sweeping for threats when the lights suddenly went out. Emergency illumination, Thexral ordered, but nothing happened. Unknown to him, Sarah had already disabled the backup systems in this section. That's when the first explosion came. Not from weapons fire, but from carefully placed charges that Sarah had rigged using kitchen supplies. Flour dust, properly dispersed and ignited, created devastating fireballs that could crack even Zephyrian armor. The surviving aliens stumbled through smoke and flame, their formation broken when Sarah triggered the atmospheric dump. Emergency airlocks blew open with tremendous force, creating a wind tunnel that hurled debris and bodies toward the vacuum of space. Commander Thexral managed to activate his suit's magnetic clamps, anchoring himself to the deck plating, but half his squad was gone in an instant. The survivors found themselves scattered, isolated, and facing an enemy who seemed to know their every move before they made it. This is impossible, Thexral transmitted to his fleet. The human is everywhere at once. She knows things about warfare that no civilian should know. Admiral Vexkar was beginning to reach the same conclusion. The reports from his boarding parties described tactics that belonged in military academies, not aboard a civilian transport. Whoever was defending this ship had combat experience that exceeded his own warriors. Recall all boarding parties, he ordered reluctantly. Prepare the heavy assault units. If one human can cause this much damage, we will simply ensure that no human survives to resist us. But Sarah wasn't done yet. In fact, she was just getting started. Admiral Vexkar stood before the tactical display in his command chamber, his 4 eyes studying the human ship with new respect. In 30 minutes of combat, he had lost 67 elite warriors to a single enemy combatant. The impossible had become reality. One human was winning a battle against an entire fleet. Status report from all surviving teams, he demanded. His communications officers' scales had paled to an unhealthy gray. Admiral, we have 12 warriors remaining aboard the target vessel. They are requesting immediate extraction. Requesting? Vexkar's voice carried deadly quiet. Zephyrian warriors did not request anything. They conquered or they died. Sir, Commander Thexral reports that the human defender is employing tactics outside their tactical database. Quote, she fights like the ship itself is alive and angry. End quote. In the depths of the horizon, the surviving Zephyrians had barricaded themselves in the main cargo bay, the largest open space they could find. They reasoned that their enemy couldn't use the ventilation system or confined spaces against them here. It was logical thinking that showed they still didn't understand what they were facing. Sarah studied the cargo bay through security cameras, noting their defensive positions. 12 aliens heavily armed, expecting her to come through the main entrances like a conventional enemy. She almost felt sorry for them. Instead, she went to the ship's industrial fabrication unit and began assembling something that didn't officially exist in any military manual. Using components from the kitchen's automated systems, emergency medical supplies, and a few items from the ship's machine shop. She created what her old unit had nicknamed party favors. 20 minutes later, the Zephyrians in the cargo bay began to notice a strange sweet smell, filtering through the air recycling system. Trooper Kelvash was the first to identify it. Atmospheric contamination, he reported. Some kind of aerosol compound. It smells like food? What they were smelling was Sarah's own modification of an old Special Forces trick. Concentrated extract of certain spices, when properly weaponized, could create effects ranging from hallucination to temporary paralysis. She had just dosed an entire cargo bay with enough concentrated capsaicin to incapacitate a battalion. The effects began within minutes. Zephyrian warriors, apex predators who had conquered star systems, found themselves unable to breathe. Their thermal vision blurred by tears their biology couldn't control. They stumbled blindly through the cargo bay, firing at shadows while Sarah watched from the safety of the control room. "This is Commander Thexril to all units," came the panicked transmission. "The human has..." "She's using biological warfare. Our equipment cannot filter this compound. Requesting immediate medical support." Sarah keyed her communicator to the enemy frequency she had cracked hours ago. When she spoke, her voice carried the cold professionalism that had once made terrorist leaders wake up screaming. "This is Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen, United Earth Navy SEALs. You came to my ship. You threatened my people. You made the mistake of thinking humans are easy prey." The alien frequency went silent for several seconds before Admiral Vexkar himself responded. "Human warrior. I am Admiral Vexkar of the 3rd Zephyrian Fleet. I acknowledge your effectiveness. Perhaps we can reach an agreement." "The only agreement you're going to get," Sarah replied, "is the one where you turn around and run. Because if you don't, I'm going to show you why my species climbed to the top of the food chain on a death world." "Impossible. You are one individual against an entire fleet." "Admiral, let me explain something about humans. We're not the biggest, fastest, or strongest species in the galaxy, but we have one advantage that you clearly don't understand. When you threaten our families, our children, our future, we don't just fight back. We get creative." To demonstrate her point, Sarah activated the cargo bay's emergency systems. Industrial loading arms designed to move massive containers suddenly came to life with reprogrammed instructions. The dozen incapacitated Zephyrians found themselves grabbed by mechanical hands and systematically stuffed into cargo containers. "Your warriors are now secured in shipping containers with limited air supply," Sarah announced. "You have 30 minutes to begin withdrawal, or they become the first casualties of a very long war." Captain Rodriguez watched from the bridge as the alien fleet began showing signs of uncertainty. Ships that had been moving into attack formation now held position, their commanders clearly debating their next move. "Chen," he called over secure communications, "their main fleet is still out there. Even if they withdraw the boarding parties, they could still destroy the ship." "Not if I have anything to say about it," Sarah replied. "Captain, I need you to trust me one more time. When I give the signal, I want you to open a communication channel to their fleet commander." "What are you planning? Something that's either going to save us all or get us killed in the most spectacular way possible." Sarah made her way back to the kitchen where this had all started. Among the pots and pans, the carefully organized spices in the ovens that had brought comfort to 800 souls, she began assembling her final surprise. The device she constructed looked like nothing more than a modified pressure cooker attached to the ship's communication array, but any Special Forces operative would have recognized it immediately as a weapon capable of transmitting specific electromagnetic frequencies across interstellar distances. "Admiral Vexkar," she transmitted, "I'm going to make you an offer. You can withdraw your fleet now and report to your superiors that humanity is not the easy conquest you thought we were. Or you can try to destroy this ship and discover why the Galactic Council classifies human homeworld as a extreme hazard zone. You threaten me with one ship?" "No." Sarah smiled grimly as she activated her device. "I threaten you with what's about to happen when every human military unit within 50 light-years receives the distress beacon I just activated." "Admiral, you're about to learn why picking a fight with humans is considered a fatal mistake by every intelligent species in this galaxy." The beacon began transmitting humanity's most sacred call, the one that meant civilians were under attack and needed immediate assistance. Across space, human naval units would drop everything to respond. The Admiral had perhaps 6 hours before the first reinforcements arrived. But Sarah wasn't done yet. She had one more lesson to teach about the dangers of underestimating a human with nothing left to lose. The distress beacon's transmission rippled across space at faster-than-light speeds, carrying with it the coded message that would bring the full wrath of humanity down upon anyone foolish enough to threaten their civilians. But Admiral Vexkar didn't know that yet. He was still focused on the impossible situation unfolding before him. "Admiral," his tactical officer reported with barely concealed panic, "long-range sensors are detecting inbound contacts, multiple signatures moving at maximum military speed directly toward our position." Vexkar's scales darkened with rage. "How many contacts?" 16 confirmed, sir. Possibly more beyond sensor range. The signatures match human naval vessels, destroyers, cruisers, and... Admiral, there's a Dreadnought-class signature among them. For the first time in his military career, Admiral Vexkar felt something approaching fear. A human dreadnought meant a ship capable of reducing his entire fleet to stellar debris. But that wasn't what truly terrified him. What terrified him was the realization that he had made a fundamental error in understanding humanity. Aboard the Horizon, Sarah monitored the alien fleet's communications through the frequencies she had infiltrated. Their confidence was cracking, replaced by the kind of uncertainty that preceded military disasters. But she knew the arriving fleet might not reach them in time if the Admiral decided to destroy the colony ship out of spite. Time for the final lesson. "Captain Rodriguez," she called over the secure channel, "I need you to patch me through to the ship's main communication system. Every speaker, every display, every communication device aboard the Horizon. Done. You're broadcasting ship-wide." Sarah's voice echoed through every corridor and compartment of the massive vessel. "Attention all hands, this is Staff Sergeant Sarah Chen. For the past 2 hours we have been under attack by an alien force that believed humans were easy prey. They were wrong. In the civilian shelters, families looked up from their huddled positions as the cook they thought they knew revealed herself to be something entirely different. I want everyone to understand something," Sarah continued. "The enemy assumed that because we're civilians, we're helpless. They assumed that because we carry no weapons, we can't fight back. They assumed that because we seek peace, we don't know war." Dr. Martinez held his daughter closer as the woman's voice carried through the shelter speakers with deadly certainty. "They were wrong about all of it. Humans don't carry weapons because we are weapons. We don't need to look threatening because we're the species that survived ice ages, plagues, and 10,000 years of warfare against our own kind. We're the species that looked at a hostile universe and decided to colonize it anyway." Through the ship's external cameras, civilian families could see the alien fleet holding position, their aggressive formations wavering as uncertainty spread through their ranks. Right now, every human military unit within 50 light years is racing to our position, not because we asked for help, but because threatening human civilians activates something deep in our species' collective memory. We remember the times when survival meant standing together against the darkness. Sarah paused, watching the alien fleet through the security feeds. Several ships were already beginning to move away from attack positions. But I want the enemy listening to this transmission to understand something else. You don't need to wait for our fleet to arrive to learn why attacking humans is a mistake. You just need to understand what you're really facing. In the cargo bay, the 12 captured Zephyrians listened to the human's voice with growing horror. They had begun to suspect that their captivity was only the beginning of their problems. "My name is Sarah Chen. Until today, I was just a cook who wanted to feed people and live in peace. But I'm also a graduate of the Sol System Naval Academy, a veteran of the Proxima campaign, and a former member of humanity's most elite Special Forces unit." Admiral Vexkar felt his certainty crumbling as the implications hit him. If this level of lethality existed in a single human civilian, what would actual human military forces be capable of? "I volunteered for kitchen duty specifically to avoid violence," Sarah's voice continued. "I wanted to spend my time creating instead of destroying. I wanted to nurture life instead of ending it. But you forced me to remember what I am underneath the apron and the smile." The alien fleet's formation continued to deteriorate as ship commanders received increasingly panicked reports from their boarding parties. The 12 survivors were now completely incapacitated, sealed in cargo containers and waiting for extraction that might never come. You see, the thing about humans is that we compartmentalize. We can be teachers, doctors, engineers, cooks, peaceful people living peaceful lives, but we never forget the other skills we carry. We never lose the instincts that got us to the top of the food chain. Lieutenant Barnes, who had harbored a crush on the kind cook, stared at the security monitors in shock. The woman who had given him fresh bread and gentle smiles was calmly discussing military tactics while surrounded by alien corpses. Every human on this ship carries that duality, Sarah continued. Dr. Martinez in Shelter 7 is a xenobiologist, but he's also a veteran of the Titan mining wars. Chief O'Brien is an engineer, but he served 3 tours with the Outer Rim Defense Force. Lieutenant Commander Hayes commanded a destroyer during the Centauri blockade before transferring to civilian service. The revelation sent shockwaves through both the human crew and the listening alien forces. This wasn't just a colony ship. It was a vessel crewed by veterans who had chosen civilian life but never forgotten their training. We came out here to build something new, something peaceful. We brought our children, our hopes, our dreams of a better future, and you threatened all of that. Sarah activated the ship's external cameras and turned them toward the alien fleet. Admiral Vexcar, I want you to look very carefully at what you're facing. This isn't just one human with military training. This is 847 humans who have decided that you represent a threat to everything they love. Through the ship's corridors, a change was taking place. Civilians were emerging from their shelters, but they weren't panicked refugees anymore. They moved with purpose, with the kind of organized determination that spoke of military discipline that had never truly been forgotten. Chief O'Brien appeared on the bridge, carrying an armload of weapons that officially didn't exist in the ship's inventory. Captain, the engineering teams are armed and ready. We've rigged the ship's power grid to overload on command. If they try to board us again, we'll take half their fleet with us. Dr. Martinez's voice came over the communication system from the medical bay. All medical stations are prepared for combat triage. I've also prepared several biological solutions that might prove useful against Zephyrian physiology. You wanted to harvest us like livestock. Sarah's voice carried across space to the alien fleet. You thought we were soft prey because we chose to live peacefully. But here's what you failed to understand about humans. We're only peaceful when we choose to be. Admiral Vexcar watched his tactical display as the human reinforcements drew closer. 6 hours had become 4 hours. 4 hours until he faced not just one impossibly lethal human, but an entire fleet of them. Humans are persistence hunters, Sarah continued, her voice now carrying the weight of 10,000 years of evolutionary advantage. We don't give up. We don't surrender. We don't forget. And we don't forgive threats to our children. The final revelation came when Sarah activated the ship's manufacturing systems. All across the horizon, industrial fabricators began producing items that had been programmed into their systems during the ship's construction but never activated weapons, armor, military equipment that had been hidden in plain sight. Waiting for exactly this situation. Admiral, you have 30 minutes to withdraw your fleet and release my people. After that, this stops being a rescue operation and becomes a war crime tribunal. Because that dreadnought heading our way? That's the UES Retribution, and her captain doesn't negotiate with species that threaten human civilians. For Admiral Vexcar, the choice had become simple. Retreat with the knowledge that his empire had just encountered something that challenged everything they thought they knew about prey species, or face the approaching human fleet and likely lose everything. But Sarah wasn't finished yet. She had one final demonstration to offer about the true nature of humanity. Admiral Vexcar stood in his command chamber, watching the tactical display that showed his carefully planned conquest turning into a disaster of unprecedented proportions. The human reinforcements were now 3 hours away, led by a dreadnought whose reputation was known even to Zephyrian intelligence. But more importantly, the civilian transport he had expected to conquer in minutes had revealed itself to be something far more dangerous. Admiral, his communications officer reported with barely controlled terror. The human is transmitting again. Sarah's voice cut through the static of interstellar space with the calm precision of someone who had already won. Admiral Vexcar, my sensors show your fleet is still in attack formation. That suggests you haven't fully grasped the situation you're in. What more can you possibly threaten me with, human? Vexcar replied, though his voice lacked its earlier confidence. You are one ship against my fleet. That's where you're wrong, Sarah said. And suddenly every screen in the alien fleet lit up with the same image. The Horizon's cargo bay, where 12 Zephyrian warriors sat in transparent containers, very much alive but completely helpless. Your warriors aren't dead, Admiral. They're evidence. Evidence of what happens when an advanced species makes the mistake of attacking human civilians. The Galactic Council has very specific laws about unprovoked attacks on colonization vessels. For the first time, Admiral Vexkar felt something approaching despair. The Galactic Council's laws were absolute, enforced by a coalition of species that included some of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. If humanity presented evidence of an unprovoked attack. But here's what I'm going to offer you, Sarah continued. A lesson in human nature that might save your empire from making an even bigger mistake. The alien fleet watched as the cargo bay containers opened, and the 12 Zephyrian warriors stumbled out, weak from their ordeal but unmistakably alive. They looked around in confusion, expecting to be executed or tortured. Instead, they found themselves facing Sarah Chen, who stood unarmed in the center of the bay. Your warriors are free to return to your ships, she announced, unharmed, uninjured, and with full knowledge of what they experienced here today. Admiral Vexkar stared at the display in disbelief. You're releasing them? After what they did to your ship? That's the other thing you don't understand about humans, Admiral. We're capable of mercy even toward enemies who show us none. Your warriors were following orders. They're not the ones who made the decision to attack civilians. The released Zephyrians made their way to the emergency airlocks, where transport pods waited to return them to their fleet. As they departed, each one carried with them the knowledge that they had been defeated not by superior firepower or numbers, but by a single human who had turned their own advantages against them. But don't mistake mercy for weakness, Sarah added as the last transport pod departed. Admiral, I want you to understand something. What happened here today wasn't a battle. It was a demonstration. One human operating alone eliminated 2/3 of your boarding force and turned your invasion into a rescue operation. Captain Rodriguez watched from the bridge as the alien fleet began a slow withdrawal, their ships moving away from attack positions for the first time since the engagement began. Chen, I think they're actually backing down. They should be, Sarah replied. Because now they have to go back to their superiors and explain how a civilian cook dismantled their elite troops using kitchen equipment and creativity. On the alien flagship, Admiral Vexkar received the reports from his returned warriors with growing unease. The human had used techniques that weren't in any military database. She had improvised weapons from cooking supplies, turned the ship's infrastructure into a weapon system, and demonstrated a level of tactical thinking that exceeded his own trained officers. But more than that, she had shown restraint when she could have shown cruelty. She had released prisoners when she could have made examples. She had offered education when she could have demanded surrender. The human fleet is now 2 hours out, his tactical officer reported. Admiral, do we engage or withdraw? Vexkar looked at the tactical display one more time, then at the reports from his warriors. The human colony ship sat in space, damaged but defiant, surrounded by the debris of his failed invasion. In a few hours, it would be surrounded by human naval vessels whose crews would be eager to avenge the attack on civilians. Signal the fleet, he ordered finally. Full withdrawal. Set course for the outer system, sir. We're abandoning the mission. We're avoiding a war that we cannot win, Vexkar replied quietly. The humans. They're not what our intelligence reports indicated. They're not prey. They're something much more dangerous. Aboard the Horizon, Sarah stood in her kitchen once again, surveying the damage from the day's events. Broken equipment, scattered supplies, and the lingering smell of combat filled the space that had been her sanctuary. But already, crew members were arriving to help clean up, to restore the heart of their ship. Lieutenant Barnes appeared in the doorway, carrying a toolkit and wearing an expression of newfound respect. Sergeant, I brought tools to help fix the kitchen. Sarah smiled, the same warm expression that had made her beloved among the crew, but now carried with it the knowledge of what lay beneath. Just Sarah is fine, Lieutenant. And thank you. We have 800 hungry people who'll want dinner once this is all over. Dr. Martinez arrived with his daughter, who had insisted on personally thanking the woman who had saved their ship. Miss Sarah, the little girl said solemnly, Daddy says you were very brave today. Just doing my job, sweetheart, Sarah replied, kneeling down to the child's level. Sometimes that job is making cookies. Sometimes it's protecting the people we care about. As the alien fleet disappeared into the outer system, and human reinforcements arrived to escort the Horizon to its destination, Life aboard the colony ship began to return to normal, but it was a new normal, one in which everyone understood that the friendly cook who made the best bread in 3-star systems was also someone who would go to any lengths to protect her family. That evening, as Sarah served dinner to a packed dining hall, the conversations were different. Children looked at her with awe, adults with gratitude, and everyone with the knowledge that humanity's greatest strength wasn't their technology or their weapons. It was their willingness to fight for each other, no matter the odds. And in the Zephyrian Empire, Admiral Vexkar submitted a report that would change how his species viewed humanity forever. The report concluded with a simple recommendation. Humanity should be classified as a level 7 species, not because of their technology or military might, but because they carry within each individual the capacity for both creation and destruction, mercy and war, peace and absolute lethality. They are not to be underestimated under any circumstances. Sarah Chen, former Navy SEAL, current head cook, had taught the galaxy a lesson that would be remembered for generations. Never mistake a human's choice to be peaceful for an inability to be anything else.